Hi, everyone. My name is Lane Elsa, and I'm honored to be here today to speak with you about my experiences as a parent of two kids who are deaf and hard of hearing. My two boys actually are age 26 and almost 18, and they were born profoundly deaf. And then about 5 years later, we found out that my oldest son was going to be losing his eyesight as well. So both of them are diagnosed with something called Usher syndrome, which is a combined hearing and vision loss. And so, because of that, both of my boys received cochlear implants at in infancy and are cochlear implant users. But my younger son, who's 18, has decided that he wanted to learn ASL later on in life. And so he is doing that right now. In addition to my experiences as a parent, I am also working right now as a itinerant teacher of the deaf up here in Washington State. So today I thought I would speak with you a little bit, mostly about my experience as a parent, but I'm going to give you some um, you know, perspective based on my professional experience as well. I also am a researcher in regards to special education, and I am a leader in family engagement related to families of children who are deaf and hard of hearing or deaf-blind. So as you can imagine, I've been in part of IEP teams for many, many years. It's been about 20 years now. And I went and got my PhD in special education. And really, it was not until I started this additional education that I really truly understood what was available to our family and to my kids. And so it became really a passion of mine to work with families and help them understand what they can ask for. Because, as I'll explain later, my kids didn't have a teacher of the deaf on the team because simply I just didn't even know to ask for it. So, it was really until my youngest son was about 9 when I advocated for him to get a teacher of the deaf on the team. And that was when I went back to school and found out that a teacher of the deaf was something that might be able to help support him in the classroom. And my oldest son was in high school at that moment in time. So it was pretty late. And so we were playing catch up. Um, so I wanted to first start out and talk a little bit about the diagnosis because I think it helps ground us into like what families might be experiencing. So about the age of 6 months, I was noticing that my oldest son, was really like sleeping through things. Like I could vacuum and like wasn't responding to loud noises, and so I took him to the pediatrician and it was pretty much dismissed. And, I'm sure everything is fine. Don't worry about it. And, if, at the year checkup, if you still have these concerns, there's really nothing we can do about it right now. So, um, why don't you just go home, enjoy your baby? It's all going to be fine. Well, I went home and I just realized, that just does not sit well with me. So I went back and said, gosh, is there anything that we can do? And that's when my advocacy journey kind of started at that point in time. And I advocated for him to go to the audiologist and get a hearing test done. And quickly we found out that he was profoundly deaf. We didn't really understand quite yet for several years why that was. But I do remember vividly going into um, getting the diagnosis from the audiologist and having them just say to me, I'm sorry, your child is deaf. There's nothing we can do. There is the thing called cochlear implants, but they're, $30,000 plus, and insurance doesn't cover them. And, you know, um, so I just left there with very little hope. I left there with very little information about the different communication modalities. I left really in despair. In just thinking about things like, is my child ever going to hear me? tell him I love him. Is he ever going to get married? Is he ever going to find someone? Is he going to have friends? All these things about his future. And so, we went through quite a journey with the diagnosis and the grief cycle, and it still kind of comes up and hits us at some points in time. But I think it's important to understand that, like, my experience in talking with a lot of other families is pretty similar to what other families experience. And so it was really up to us to figure out, like, who do we turn to? How do we get information on what's available in regards to hearing aids, cochlear implants, becoming part? What is the deaf community? Do we want to be part of that? How do we even decide? All I had at that point in time was a lot of questions, and I felt very alone. None of my friends and family really understood what I was going through, and so it was very stressful. So, fast forward, we did ultimately get information and we made a decision to get cochlear implants for our children. But again, I was a little bit frustrated knowing now because we were taught that it's one or the other. Like you couldn't be both. You couldn't use more than one communication mode. So, which I think is, it's a family's preference. And if I would have been given more information about all of this at the time, I may have decided, I really do think I would have decided to learn ASL at that moment in time. And, because all I cared about was communication, regardless of what that looked like. And I just didn't have the resources I needed at that moment. I did ultimately get our kids into early intervention and they got support and it was great. We're our family. And then we got into kindergarten. They, struggled many things socially, missed cues, things like that. Um, we ultimately, because they were doing so well with the speech therapy and things like that, you tried to move us off of a IEP into a 504 plan. And at that moment we did successfully continue the IEP, so we didn't end up having to go off of it, but the services were pretty minimal during the elementary school career because at that moment the vision loss wasn't really bad, so we were really just dealing and working with the hearing loss. But I think it's important to understand that we didn't know what a teacher of the deaf was. We didn't know that that even existed, so we didn't know to ask for it. And so I think that's the experience of most families. Many families don't even know that a teacher of the deaf exists. What is it? What is their role? Because honestly, nobody explains this to you. You just simply spend countless hours researching on the internet, trying to connect and find somebody, other families, organizations, talking with doctors, but nobody explains educational supports to you. So I think it's pretty likely that the families that you are working with, especially those who are pretty early on their diagnosis journey, really have no idea what is going to be needed as far as accommodations. What is the teacher of the deaf? Do they need a teacher of the deaf, an audiologist, a SLP? Who do they need on the team? And so because um, they don't know how, why they would reach out to you. They don't know why you're on the team. They don't know what your role is, and they don't understand the difference with what your expertise is from a special ed teacher, from an SLP, or an audiologist. For me, going to the schools now, often I get left off emails. It's like, oh, well, the audiologist is on the email. Um, and or the speech therapist, and it's very confusing both for the district but also for families, because if the district isn't able to describe, explain the difference to families about what a teacher of the deaf is versus an audiologist and an SLP very well, then you can understand why it's very confusing for families. And so I think from the get-go, it's really important that you understand that you're going to have to explain who you are, what you do, so that because they don't know what to ask. And if parents don't know, then they can't partner with you because they don't understand. So, you know, like I said, for my youngest son, we didn't have a teacher of the deaf. And so I went back to school and I determined, found out what a teacher of the deaf was and what they could do. I thought, wow, this is great. Because what I was experiencing is my son was doing really well in a gen ed class, but he was coming home from school crying every day. And I was like, what is going on? And, I found out that really he didn't know what he was missing because he was missing it. Teachers were coming up to him and saying, "Oh, do you understand what you need to be doing? Do you know what your homework is?" And he's like, "Yeah, sure." And he's a great kid. So, but he had no idea what his homework was. He didn't have nobody was asking him, they were just asking, do you understand? Instead of, can you repeat back to me and tell me what you're supposed to be doing tonight for homework? And if somebody would have gone about it a different way, they would have realized, okay, he's missing information in this class. And come to find out, what was happening is there was a lot of substitutes. The teacher was in a educational program, so was going to school and training to be a principal, and so she was in and out of the classroom. There were different substitutes. There were noise, doors opening and closing. The air conditioner was really loud. The class was really loud. It was very hard to hear, and so he was just missing a lot. And so, I went to the district and said, can we get a teacher of the deaf on the team? And they didn't even know what a teacher of the deaf was. And so it really took Dalton really describing what his needs were, um, to the district for us to get a teacher of the deaf on the team. And that's something that we had to, that the district didn't have readily available, so they had to contract it out. But again, like nobody from the district we had an amazing IEP team, but nobody knew what a TOD was. So it was really up to me, and I really had no idea either. So that's why it's really important that we get the word out and that families understand what your role is. So a little bit ago, I described kind of the grief cycle and what that looked like for us. Um, and so, I want to say to you, I've talked to so many families and I've worked with them starting from the diagnosis on, and you just really don't know where families are at in the grief cycle. You don't know, because the grief cycle is not linear. It can hit you at different times. And, there's so many transitions in a child's life into different schools, different teachers. Some teachers get it, some teachers don't. And, it can, the grief can pop up at any point in time, and it never really truly goes away. And so you also don't know what families' experiences with school are. You don't know, maybe they've had negative experiences with past IEP teams. Maybe they themselves have had challenges with the education system. You don't know what's happening at home. You don't know how exhausted or scared or what they're dealing with. Like they might be working several jobs, all of those things. And so some families, parents come in overwhelmed, they're maybe quiet, like you think maybe they're defensive or they're shut down, all the things, but that doesn't mean they don't care. It often means that they care so much that it hurts. So I wanted to tell a short story about a community meeting I was just at. So I have a little girl who that's on my caseload, and I work with her every week, and she doesn't like wearing her Baja cochlear implant. And so I've been working with her. She's a fourth grader, and we went into the IEP meeting, and the special ed teacher's like, well, all the problems would be solved if she would just come in with her hearing technology, but she's not doing it. And so, and it came across, I could just see the parent just shutting down. And I could tell that she was overwhelmed. And so I just sat there for a minute and I said, okay. Um, and I'm like, how is it going? Is she wearing it at home? And I tried to really put myself in the shoes of the parent. And and the parent was going through something. They had just lost their dog this past week. They were overwhelmed. And just sitting there and really being empathetic and thoughtful and caring with that parent, the parent opened up and said, I don't know what to do. I can't get her to wear it. I feel like a bad mom. I don't know how to get her to wear these hearing aids. She's very stubborn. She acts out at home, and I've got multiple kids of my own. I'm just struggling to get through every day, and I don't know how to get her to wear her hearing devices to school. And so it's not that I don't want to, I just don't know how. And so, I think it's important. What I learned from that story, and I hope that the other IEP team members did is, it's not as simple as, I mean, like half of my caseload doesn't wear their hearing technology, but it's not necessarily, I don't think you should assume that the parents are just not trying. Um, and it's to understand, really try to get with them and understand what's going on with them and meet them where they're at. Because in partnering with them, how do we make this work? Do we, um, so that they know what you're working with the student at school, so they can work on the same thing. Maybe there's an incentive system, maybe there's something that you guys can work with together in order to get to a positive outcome. And so through all this, I just want to really reiterate that even when parents feel like they're not reaching out to you, things like that, they're distance closed off, they don't respond. As a TOD, I send multiple texts and emails to families, and most of them go unanswered. But what I've learned is don't take it personally. Don't stop sending these texts and emails. And one day they'll remember you and when they need it the most, and they're going to reach out. I had that happen to me right before Christmas. I had just been texting families and I wasn't getting anything. And all of a sudden I did get one text back, and like that mom was like, "Oh my gosh, I finally like understand that somebody else understands that my child is really struggling in math." And so it just built that trust. And so trust just doesn't happen in one meeting, one text, one encounter. It's built over time. And so just keep showing up. Consistency matters. Follow through in what you say you're going to do. Check in, on a regular basis, and be kind and empathetic when you can. Because sometimes the teacher of the deaf is someone who changes everything and makes a big difference. It's somebody who simply doesn't give up on the child. It's often the only one on the team that really truly understands what is needed and what that family and what that child is going through. So you're often the human face in a really overwhelming process. These families have been through, they probably have a huge team of doctors, they have a huge educational team, and they're probably overwhelmed. So you are important. A few things I wish every TOD knew is that language matters. Families are learning in a whole new world. They don't know what accommodations are. They don't know what they don't know. So, and sometimes like hearing the word deaf might be hard to hear. So, understanding what language is comfortable for the family. Parents are experts on their child. So, you bring training and expertise about deafness, deaf and hard of hearing, but they bring lived experience. They know their child the best. And so, how can you partner together to, have the best outcomes for that child? And be flexible. What works for one family may not work for another. And lastly, your presence can change a family's entire journey, like it did for mine, even if you don't see it right away. Um, my son's teacher of the deaf, my son's a senior in high school right now. He got the highest scholarship that he possibly could at a private school up here in Washington State. He has a 4.0, and his teacher of the deaf wrote him the best letter of recommendation. She's been their teacher of the deaf since he was a sixth grader. And she's seen us through the ups and downs. This year, he's opted out, not wanted to do IEP services. He just wants to be a normal kid. And she's been there every step of the way. and I think of her as family at this point. And so she's truly changed our entire family's journey in such a positive way. And so that's why I really wanted to also be in this field because I want to make a difference in these families' lives, like those of you who have made a difference in my life. So, in closing, I want to say to you, will matter more than you realize, even on the days when families seem distant or frustrated. Your patience, kindness, and consistency can change their lives. Please keep showing up. Please keep explaining your role. Please keep meeting families where they're at. It makes a difference to all of us. Thank you, and best of luck to all of you in your journey.